The wind on Dravorn 9 doesn't howl. It whispers, like it's trying to tell you something but can't quite remember the words. I've been here for 3 months, or maybe 4. Time stops meaning much when every day looks the same. Grey sky, rust-colored sand, and the skeletal remains of bases that used to have names, used to have people. Now they're just monuments to the fact that we're still killing each other. My name is Kyle Dern, military interrogator, 7th Division, Human Coalition Intelligence. 29 years old, though I feel twice that. I'm good at my job. Too good, probably. I know how to make people talk. Know which questions to ask, which silences to let hang, which pressures to apply until something breaks. I've interrogated 47 prisoners since the war started. Got useful information from 39 of them. The other 8 died before they could tell me anything. Not my fault. That's what I tell myself. They were already broken when they came to me. Already halfway gone. I just finished what the war started. That's what I tell myself. The convoy came in yesterday. VAR transport. 3 vehicles, damaged from an ambush about 60 kilometers east. Our patrol picked them up trying to cross the Deadlands, shot out their engines, pinned them down. 12 prisoners total. Most were wounded. 2 died during transport. The rest are in holding cells waiting for processing. Command wants intelligence, troop movements, supply lines, anything that might give us an advantage in a war that's been going nowhere for 6 years. So they called me. I walked through the outpost as the sun set. The buildings here are prefab, metal shells half buried in sand to protect against the wind. Everything's orange in the dying light. Makes it look almost peaceful. Almost. The holding cells are underground. Safer that way. Harder for prisoners to signal for rescue. Harder for them to escape. Harder for them to remember their people instead of assets. The guard at the entrance, Morrison, young kid, maybe 20, saluted when he saw me. "Evening, sir." They're all secured. Medical checked the serious injuries. Should be stable enough for questioning. How many are conscious? 8. 2 are sedated. Medical says they might not wake up. The other 2? Morrison hesitated. One's in shock, non-responsive. The other, he trailed off. What about the other? He's just sitting there, sir. Hasn't moved since we brought him in. I haven't eaten. I haven't spoken. Just sits. I nodded. I'll start with that one. Morrison led me down the corridor. The cells were small, 10 by 10, metal walls, a cot, a drain in the floor for waste. The VAR didn't need much. Their physiology was different, more resilient. Could go days without food or water if they had to. Made them hard to break. But everyone breaks eventually. That's what I've learned. Everyone has a limit. A point where holding on becomes harder than letting go. You just have to find it. The prisoner was in cell 7. Through the observation window, I could see him. VAR physiology was distinctive. Taller than humans, maybe 7 feet when standing. Lean, angular. Their skin had a grey-blue cast that made them look carved from stone. Eyes too large, too dark. Reflective in a certain light. This one was sitting on the cot. Hands chained to a bolt in the wall, head down, perfectly still. How long has he been like that? I asked. Since we brought him in. 12 hours. Medical check him. Vitals are stable. Some scarring, old injuries, but nothing recent except minor cuts from the capture. I studied the prisoner. Something about his stillness bothered me. Most prisoners were agitated, afraid, angry, something. This one was just quiet. "Open it," I said. Morrison unlocked the door. The sound echoed in the corridor. The prisoner didn't move. I stepped inside. The cell smelled like metal and dust. The prisoner's breathing was steady, controlled, like he was meditating. "I'm going to ask you some questions," I said in standard coalition. "If you cooperate, this will be easier for both of us." No response. "Do you understand me?" Nothing. I stepped closer. The prisoner still hadn't looked up. just kept his head bowed, hands resting on his knees despite the chains. Then I noticed something. In his left hand, clutched loosely between his fingers, was a small object. I couldn't see it clearly from this angle, but it looked metallic, small, human-made. "What's that in your hand?" I asked. The prisoner's fingers tightened slightly around the object. First movement he'd made since I entered. "Let me see it." Slowly, very slowly, the prisoner raised his head and looked at me. His eyes were dark, reflective, but there was something in them that made my breath catch. Not hostility, not fear, recognition, like he knew me, which was impossible. I'd never seen this VAR before, never been to any of the sectors where his kind operated. We'd never crossed paths, but he was looking at me like he knew exactly who I was. "Show me what's in your hand," I said quietly. The prisoner opened his fingers. It was a music box, human design, old, the kind you wind up and it plays a simple melody. The casing was dented, scratched, but still intact. "Where did you get that?" I asked. The prisoner closed his hand again, said nothing. I stood there for a long moment, trying to understand, trying to figure out why this particular prisoner, this silent, scarred VAR, was carrying a piece of human childhood in a war zone. "We'll talk later," I said finally, "after you've had time to think." I left the cell. Morrison locked it behind me, but as I walked down the corridor, I could feel the prisoner's eyes on me, watching, knowing something I didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that music box, about the way the prisoner had looked at me, about the feeling that I was missing something important. I'd been doing this job too long, 6 years of interrogations, of finding pressure points, of watching people break. I was good at it because I'd learned to stop seeing them as people, started seeing them as puzzles, problems to solve. But something about that prisoner bothered me, something I couldn't name. Around midnight, I gave up trying to sleep, got dressed, headed back to the holding cells. Morrison was off duty. The night guard, Silver, barely glanced at me as I passed. I walked down the corridor to cell 7. The prisoner was still sitting on the cot, still in that same position, like he hadn't moved in 12 hours. Maybe he hadn't. I stood outside the observation window and watched him. And that's when I heard it, humming, soft, almost inaudible, but definitely there. The prisoner was humming. A melody, simple, repetitive, and familiar. I pressed closer to the window, trying to hear better. The sound was so faint I almost thought I was imagining it. But no, he was humming, and the tune. My chest tightened. I knew that tune. It was a lullaby, human lullaby, old, traditional, the kind parents sang to children to help them sleep. My mother used to sing it to me. Before the war, before everything fell apart. I hadn't heard it in 15 years, and a VAR prisoner was humming it in a cell on Drayvorn 9. I opened the door without thinking. The prisoner stopped humming immediately, looked up at me with those dark, knowing eyes. "Where did you learn that song?" I demanded. No response. "Answer me. Where did you learn that song?" The prisoner just looked at me. Then slowly, deliberately, he raised his chained hands and pointed at his mouth. Shook his head, couldn't speak, or wouldn't. "You can hum, but you can't talk," I said. The prisoner lowered his hands. I looked down at the floor, and then, using his index finger, he began scratching something into the dust and grime. Letters, human letters. I watched as he carefully traced out 2 words. "You taught me." I stared at those words, at the prison, at the impossibility of what he was suggesting. "I never taught you anything," I said. "I've never seen you before." The prisoner looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something in his expression, something that looked like sadness. Then he turned away, lowered his head again, went back to that perfect stillness, leaving me standing there with questions I couldn't answer. and a melody I couldn't forget. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my quarters with the lights off, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember, trying to figure out how a VAR prisoner knew a song my mother used to sing. The war started when I was 14. That's when everything changed. When the VAR ships arrived in coalition space, when the fighting began. My family was on Halvan Reach, industrial colony, nothing strategic, nothing worth targeting. But the VAR didn't care about strategic value in those early days. They just pushed forward, burned everything, took everything. Halvan Reach fell in the first wave. I survived. Barely. Got evacuated with other refugees, spent 2 years in processing camps before I was old enough to enlist. Joined the military at 16. Been fighting ever since. But my memories of Halvan Reach were fragmented. Trauma does that. Breaks things. Scattered pieces. Makes the past feel like a story someone told you instead of something you lived. I remembered explosions, fire, running, my mother's hands in mine, and then nothing. Just waking up in a medical transport with other survivors. No one ever told me what happened, how I survived when so many didn't. I just assumed I'd been lucky. But now, you taught me. What did that mean? Command sent orders the next morning. Standard intelligence request. They wanted preliminary reports on all prisoners. Anything useful, anything actionable. I had 48 hours to deliver results. I spent the morning interviewing the other VAR prisoners. Most were low-level, supply runners, transport escorts. They didn't know anything valuable. The ones who did know something weren't talking. By afternoon, I'd gotten nowhere, which left Cell 7, the silent prisoner, the one who hummed lullabies and claimed I'd taught him, needed answers. Command needed answers. So I did what I was trained to do. I went to work. The interrogation room was smaller than the cells, cramped, one chair bolted to the floor, restraints, bright overhead light that never turned off, designed to disorient, to make prisoners feel exposed, vulnerable. They brought the prisoner in at 1400 hours, chained him to the chair, left us alone. I sat across from him, close enough to see the scarring on his hands, the old wounds that had healed wrong, the way his breathing stayed steady despite the restraints. Command wants information, I said. Troop movements, supply routes, anything about your unit's mission. The prisoner said nothing. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to. You understand that? No response. I leaned forward. You hummed a song last night. A human song. I want to know how you learned it. The prisoner's eyes flicked up to meet mine, just for a second, then back down. Was it something you heard on a broadcast? Something you picked up from a prisoner? Where? Silence. I tried for 30 minutes. Questions. Pressure. Silence. Nothing. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't move, just sat there with that same calm expression, like he was waiting for something. Finally, I stood up. I'll be back. And next time, I won't be patient. I left the room. Took a break. I tried to clear my head, but I kept thinking about that song, about the words scratched in the dust. You taught me. The second session was harder. I used standard pressure techniques, sleep deprivation, stress positions, controlled discomfort, the kind of things that don't leave permanent damage but make people desperate to talk. The prisoner endured all of it without making a sound. Hours passed. My frustration grew. Command was expecting results. I had nothing. Just give me something, I said. My voice sounded strained. Anything. A name, a location, something I can use. The prisoner looked at me, and for the first time he opened his mouth. Not to speak, just to show me. His tongue was gone, cut out, old injury, healed but permanent. He couldn't speak because he physically couldn't anymore. I stared at that empty space where his tongue should have been, at the evidence of torture that predated his capture. That had nothing to do with me. Who did that to you? I asked quietly. The prisoner closed his mouth, lowered his head, and went back to silence. I reported to command that evening, told them the prisoner couldn't speak, that he'd been tortured previously, that he didn't have useful intelligence. They told me to keep trying, use enhanced methods if necessary. Enhanced methods, that's what they called it. Like there was something sophisticated about causing pain, something professional, but I knew what it meant, what they were asking me to do. I'd done it before, to other prisoners, when standard techniques failed. It worked. Sometimes, made people desperate enough to write answers even if they couldn't speak them. But something about this prisoner was different, something I couldn't explain. I went back to cell 7 that night. He was humming again, that same melody, that same lullaby. I stood outside the window and listened, and slowly, impossibly, I started to remember. The memory came in pieces. I was 7 years old. Halvan Reach was burning. My mother was pulling me through smoke-filled streets. Explosions everywhere, screaming, chaos. And then her hand was gone. Just gone. 1 second she was pulling me. The next second I was alone in the smoke. I stumbled forward, crying, terrified, not understanding what was happening. That's where the memory usually ended, where trauma had drawn a line and said no further. But now, standing outside that cell, listening to that lullaby, something cracked open. I remembered stumbling into a collapsed building, hiding under debris, shaking so hard I thought I'd break apart. And then something found me. Something tall, angular, grey-blue skin. A var. I screamed. I tried to run, but the var had grabbed me, hold me still. And then, impossibly, it had started humming. That lullaby. My mother's lullaby. I'd stopped screaming, stopped struggling, just stared at this enemy soldier who was humming to comfort a terrified child. It had carried me through the ruins, kept me hidden from patrols, gotten me to an evacuation point. And then it disappeared. I'd never told anyone, never mentioned it in debriefings, because who would believe that a VAR soldier had saved a human child? Who would believe that the enemy had shown mercy? But it happened. And now, 15 years later, I was staring at that same VAR through a cell window, the one I'd been torturing for information, the one who'd saved my life. I opened the cell door. The prisoner stopped humming. "Look at me." "It was you," I said. My voice barely worked. "On Halvan Reach, you saved me." The prisoner didn't move. "You carried me through the city, kept me hidden, got me to the evacuation point." I stepped closer. "Why? Why would you save a human child?" The prisoner slowly raised his hands, pointed at me, then at himself, made a gesture, palms together, then spreading apart. "Same, different, but the same." "I've been torturing you," I said, "for days. And you knew who I was the whole time." The prisoner nodded slowly. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you—" I stopped. I remembered the missing tongue. "You couldn't tell me." The prisoner tapped his chest, then pointed at me again, made that same gesture, same, different, but same. I sank down onto the cot. My hands were shaking, my mind was reeling, trying to process what this meant, what I'd done. "Command wants me to get information from you," I said. "They want me to use enhanced interrogation. They want results." The prisoner just looked at me, those dark eyes reflecting the cell's dim light. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "If I don't get something, anything, they'll execute you. Standard protocol for non-cooperative prisoners." The prisoner reached into his pocket, slowly, so I could see it wasn't a threat. Pulled out that music box, the one I'd seen before. He held it out to me. I took it. The metal was warm from his body heat, worn smooth in places from handling. "Where did you get this?" I asked. The prisoner mimed singing, rocking, like cradling a child. "My mother. This was my mother's." I stared at the music box. "She was holding this when we got separated." The prisoner nodded. You found it. I kept it all these years. Another nod. I wound the music box. The mechanism was stiff, but still worked. The melody played, tinny and faint, but unmistakable. The same lullaby, the same song. We sat there in that cell, listening to it play. This tiny piece of humanity was preserved by an enemy soldier for 15 years. And I realized I was crying. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't remember. The prisoner reached out, hands still chained, and touched my shoulder. Gentle, brief. Forgiveness I didn't deserve. What do I do? I asked. How do I fix this? The prisoner pulled back, used his finger to scratch new words in the dust. Mercy is harder than killing. I stared at those words, at the truth they contained. Killing was easy. I'd done it before, could do it again. Quick, clean, over. But mercy meant consequences, meant explaining to command why I'd failed, meant risking my own position, maybe my own life. Mercy was complicated, dangerous, hard, but it was also the only thing that separated us from the war itself. The only thing that made us something other than machines following orders. I'll try, I said. I'll find a way. I promise. The prisoner nodded, closed his eyes, and went back to that perfect stillness, like he was at peace, like he'd already made his choice. Command called at 0600 hours. Colonel Haverson, my direct superior, voice flat and businesslike through the comm. Dern, status report on prisoner 7. I'd been awake all night, trying to figure out what to say, how to explain, how to protect someone who'd protected me. Prisoner is non-cooperative, sir. Physical interrogation yielded no results. The subject is unable to speak due to previous injury. Enhanced methods. Applied. No change. Silence on the line. Long enough that I thought the connection had dropped. Then, that prisoner was flagged as high value. Intel suggests he's former VAR Special Operations. Probably knows significant strategic information. My stomach dropped. Sir, I don't believe. Your belief is irrelevant, Lieutenant. Results are what matter. You have 12 hours to extract actionable intelligence. If you fail, Prisoner 7 will be transferred to Central Command for aggressive interrogation. Understood? Sir. Understood, Lieutenant. I closed my eyes. Understood, sir. The line went dead. 12 hours. That's all I had. 12 hours to either betray someone who'd saved my life or lose him to interrogators who wouldn't hesitate, who wouldn't care, who'd break him completely and leave nothing behind but trauma and compliance. I went to the cell. The prisoner was awake, sitting in that same position, like he'd been waiting. Command knows your special operations, I said without preamble. They think you have strategic intelligence. They're giving me 12 hours. After that, they're transferring you. The prisoner didn't react. The interrogators at Central Command. I couldn't finish. He knew. We both knew what happened there. I sat down across from him. I could lie. Tell them you gave me something. Make up intelligence. Buy you time. The prisoner shook his head. Why not? Why won't you let me help you? He scratched in the dust again. War ends when we stop fighting back. That's not true. War ends when one side wins. War ends when we choose mercy over hate. I stared at those words, at the philosophy that had kept this soldier holding a music box for 15 years, that had made him save an enemy child in the middle of destruction. They'll kill you, I said. You understand that? If I don't give them what they want, you die. The prisoner nodded. Calm, accepting. Better to die with mercy than live without it. That's easy to say when you're not the one pulling the trigger. He looked at me and scratched one more line. "You already know what to do. You knew when you found me." And he was right. I had known. From the moment I saw him, from the moment I heard that lullaby, from the moment the memory cracked open, I'd known exactly what choice I was going to make. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. I spent the next 6 hours documenting everything, wrote a full report, detailed, honest, explained who the prisoner was, what he'd done, why he mattered, explained that some intelligence was worth more than information, that some acts of mercy deserved recognition, that we couldn't win this war by becoming worse than our enemies. I knew command wouldn't care, knew they'd probably court-martial me. I knew my career was over the moment I submitted it. But I submitted it anyway, because the prisoner was right. Mercy was harder than killing, but it was also the only thing worth fighting for. The response came 2 hours later, not from Havison, from someone higher, someone whose name I didn't recognize, but whose authority was absolute. Report received. Prisoner 7, classified non-essential, scheduled for immediate execution. You are relieved of interrogation duties, effective immediately. Report to Central Command for disciplinary review. I read it 3 times. They were going to kill him anyway, despite everything, despite the report, despite the truth. They didn't care about mercy, about what he'd done, about what he represented. They just cared about winning, and anyone who didn't contribute to winning was expendable. I went to the cell one last time. The prisoner was standing now, facing the door, like he'd been waiting for me. "They're coming," I said. "In 20 minutes. I tried. I wrote the report, explained everything, but I couldn't finish." The prisoner nodded, scratched one last message. "Don't forget the song." "I won't," I promised. "I won't forget." He stepped forward, as close as the chains would allow, and he hummed, one last time, that lullaby, that gift from 15 years ago. I stood there and listened, memorizing it, memorizing him, this enemy soldier who'd been more human than most humans I'd known. When he finished, I asked the question I'd been afraid to ask. Was it worth it? Saving me, carrying that music box all these years. Was any of it worth it? The prisoner looked at me, and slowly, deliberately, he smiled. The first expression I'd seen from him beyond stillness, and somehow, that smile said everything. Yes, it was worth it, because mercy always is. They came at 1800 hours. 2 guards, standard execution protocol, quick, professional, efficient. I wasn't allowed to be present, wasn't allowed to witness, but I heard the shot. Single round, clean kill, over in seconds. I sat in my quarters and listened to the silence that followed. And I wound up that music box, let it play that lullaby one more time, thinking about mercy, about choices, about what we lose when we stop seeing enemies as people, thinking about a VAR soldier who'd saved a human child because it was the right thing to do, not because it was strategic, not because it was ordered, just because mercy mattered more than hate. I was court-martialed 3 days later, discharged, stripped of rank, blacklisted from military service. They called it dereliction of duty, called it treason, called it a dozen things that made me sound like a traitor instead of someone who'd tried to do the right thing. I didn't defend myself, didn't argue, just accepted the judgment and walked away. Because the prisoner was right. War ends when we stop fighting back, when we choose mercy over hate, when we remember that enemies are people too. I couldn't end the war, couldn't change the system, couldn't save him, but I could remember, could carry that music box, that lullaby, that moment of mercy in the middle of destruction, could make sure someone knew his story, his choice, his truth. I'm recording this from a refugee station in the outer colonies. No one knows my name here. No one cares about my past. I'm just another displaced person trying to figure out how to live in a galaxy that won't stop killing itself. But every night, I wind up that music box. Listen to that lullaby. Remember a VAR prisoner who spoke human better than most humans I've known, who taught me that mercy isn't weakness, that choosing compassion in the middle of cruelty is the bravest thing anyone can do, that enemies are just people on the other side of a line someone else drew. I don't know if the war will ever end. Don't know if humanity and the VAR will ever find peace. But I know this. The prisoner who spoke human changed me, saved me twice, once on Halvan Reach and once in that cell on Dravorn 9, saved me from becoming something I wouldn't have recognized, something that followed orders without question, something that forgot that mercy matters. I'll carry his gift for the rest of my life. This music box, this song, this reminder that even in war, we can choose to be better, that we can choose mercy over hate, even when it costs everything, especially when it costs everything. The music box still plays, the lullaby still echoes, and somewhere in the silence between notes, a VAR soldier hums along, reminding us that mercy never dies. It just waits for someone brave enough to choose it.